Imagine a place in the heart of Europe, a land so rich, so fertile, it was literally called the breadbasket of the continent. Just endless fields of wheat, this incredible black earth. But then, in 1932, something happened. The fields went quiet, the harvest vanished, and an entire nation began to starve to death.
And that right there, that's the central, chilling mystery of the Holodomor. This wasn't a desert. It wasn't a land hit by some biblical drought. This was a land of plenty. So how? How does that happen? Well, the answer is so much worse than any natural disaster, and it's a story that was deliberately buried for more than half a century.
Just let that number sink in for a second. 3.9 million. That is the minimum number of Ukrainians who died, men, women, and children. It's a number so huge it's almost impossible to wrap your head around. And the most twisted part? They didn't die because the food ran out. They died because the food was taken.
So this is what we're going to unpack. Here at Veiled Histories, we pull back the curtain on some of the darkest, most hidden chapters of our past. And the evidence we're looking at today, it doesn't point to a tragic accident of nature. It points to a calculated, man-made famine engineered to break a people. A story the world was told never even happened.
Okay, so first things first. To really get the scale of this crime, you have to understand what came before it. Before the hunger, there was abundance. I mean, Ukraine's soil was legendary. It wasn't just another part of the Soviet Union. It was the agricultural engine. It produced this massive surplus of grain that was supposed to feed the whole Union, with plenty left over to sell overseas. This was the one place that was supposed to prevent famine, not suffer from it.
And the first big clue that this wasn't just a bad harvest. It doesn't come from secret diaries or survivor stories. It comes from the cold, hard data of the state's own books.
Okay, now look closely at this table, because this tells you everything. This is based on the state's own numbers for 1932. See that top line? Total production, 9.1 million tons of grain. That works out to over a kilogram of grain per person per day. Now, look down here at what a person actually needs to survive, 0.78 kilograms. So, simple math, right? There was more than enough food. But, and this is the killer detail, look at state procurement. The government took 4.2 million tons. And just like that, what was left for the people in the countryside dropped to half a kilogram a day, well below survival level.
So let's be absolutely clear. The famine wasn't because of a crop failure. It was because of forced collection. The food was there. It existed. The state just took it. Which leads to an even darker question. If they were taking the food, who exactly were they taking it from?
And this is where modern research just blows the whole thing wide open. This chart shows a finding from the National Bureau of Economic Research, and it's absolutely chilling. It shows a direct link between the number of famine deaths and the percentage of ethnic Ukrainians in any given area. Put simply, the more Ukrainian a region was, the more people died. It had nothing to do with how much grain was grown there, it had everything to do with who lived there.
So if this was a targeted event, you have to ask, how on earth did they pull it off? The answer lies in a series of brutal state policies that literally turned food into a weapon of mass destruction.
And at the core of it all was this terrifying thing called the blacklist. This wasn't just a slap on the wrist. When a village got blacklisted, it was completely sealed off. No food was allowed in, no one was allowed out. Then brigades would go door to door and confiscate everything. Every last potato, every bag of flour. It was a death sentence, delivered to an entire community at once.
And this wasn't chaos, it was a system, a four-step playbook. First, you set grain quotas so high they're impossible to meet. Then, when the villages inevitably fail, you accuse them of sabotage. Step 3, you send in the brigades to take everything and put the village on a blacklist. And finally, step 4, you seal the borders of the entire republic. You trap millions of people inside a giant open-air prison and just let them starve.
Digging into the mechanics of a hidden atrocity like this, that's really what we are all about here at Veiled Histories. These are the stories that were never meant to be told, and your support really does help make sure they see the light of day. If you believe these histories have to be told, please just take a second to like this explainer, subscribe to our channel, and hit that little bell so you don't miss what's next.
So we have the what and we have the how, but that still leaves the biggest, most disturbing question of all. Why? Why would any government do this to its own breadbasket?
And unbelievably, we get the answer from Stalin himself. In a private letter, he wasn't talking about crop yields or economics. He was talking about Ukrainian peasants resisting his policies, and he saw it as a political threat. He was afraid of losing control. In the Kremlin's eyes, Ukraine's independent spirit was a danger that had to be extinguished.
And if you need it spelled out any clearer, just listen to what his deputy, Lazar Kaganovich, said. This wasn't just about farmers who didn't follow orders. This was about Ukrainians. Their very identity was seen as a threat to the whole Soviet project. And so, the famine became the tool they used to crush not just a rebellion, but an entire nation's will to exist.
So those are the cold political motives. But on the ground, for millions of people, this wasn't about politics. It was about an unimaginable human cost, a level of cruelty that's hard to even speak about. The fact that we have any images of this horror at all is a miracle. Documenting the famine was a serious crime. But an Austrian engineer named Alexander Wienerberger was stationed there, and he risked arrest, imprisonment, maybe even death to secretly take these photographs. He smuggled them out of the country so that one day the world would have proof.
The state even found a way to profit from the suffering. They set up these special stores called torsion stores. There, starving people could trade their most precious family heirlooms, wedding rings, gold crosses, for a little bit of food. This quote from a survivor just says it all. A mother's earrings, a priceless memory, traded for just enough food to keep her family alive for one more week.
As the hunger got worse, society just broke. With everything taken, people ate grass, weeds, tree bark, leather, anything to stop the pain. And the horror reaches absolute lowest point with verified reports of cannibalism, the final desperate act in a world that had been completely stripped of its humanity. But the crime didn't end when the starvation did. Maybe the most insidious part of it all was the massive, decades-long effort to make sure no one ever knew it happened. The killing was followed by a cover-up. The denial started while millions were still dying, and it went on for over 50 years. Just mentioning the famine was a crime against the state. Get this, in 1937, a man was sent to prison for 8 years, just for writing in his own private diary that his son died of hunger. It was a truth so dangerous you couldn't even whisper it to yourself. It was only after the Soviet Union collapsed that Ukraine could finally start to reclaim its own story, a fight that is still going on today.
The Holodomor shows us just how completely a truth that affects millions of people can be buried when a state has enough power. It took half a century for this story to truly come out. It makes you stop and wonder, doesn't it? If a crime this massive could be hidden for so long, what other histories are still out there, veiled in silence?